All right, great. So I am excited to introduce our presenter tonight. He is Stuart Schwartz, and he is a graduate of the Art Center College of Design, and he was a freelance advertising photographer. And Stuart began in the studio shooting still life images and later working with people on sets in the studio and on location. He still occasionally shoots for clients, but Stuart spends the bulk of his time teaching and mentoring photographers at the Image Flow Photography Center in San Anselmo. And Stuart's personal work reflects his passion for portraiture, street photography, abstract, and mixed media. And
Could I suggest we all mute ourselves?
great idea. And feel free to share your screen, Stuart.
Okie dokie.
And one more thing, we're going to have Q&A at the end, so just hold on to your questions, and at the end we can ask lots of things.
Okay. Good evening, everybody, and thanks for showing up. Yeah, like Stephanie said, I'm going to share some work. I'm sharing an awful lot with you guys. I just want to give you a little bit of background first. I started shooting professionally in 1973. I got a really wonderful opportunity with what you'll see here is, oh, hold on. That was one of my first claims to fame. I was living on Maui and was able to shoot the Maui Land and Pineapple annual report. That was, it was shot in '73, and that was my first published work. And this was just part of it, but to this day, it's one of my favorite pictures, probably because psychologically it made a really big difference in my life. I'm going to move kind of quickly through a lot of it. And yeah, if you have questions, yeah, please write them down. I'm more than happy to answer any questions later on. And these are some of the other types of pictures that I would take on Maui, always keeping my eye open for the unusual. At Art Center, I did a lot of street photography, various projects. This was done out on Fairfax Boulevard in LA. I did a whole reportage on Fairfax Boulevard. Wait, something's not. Come on. Yep, there we go, I hope. Yeah, so we're rolling again. Yeah, so it was just hitting the streets, and it was one of my favorite things to do. At Art Center, we had to learn everything, okay? And one of my main reasons for going to Art Center was, as a photographer early on, I had no idea how to light anything. I had no sense of composition, at least in the studio. I think I was kind of relatively talented out on the street, but yeah, in the studio, I was hopeless. And that was one of my main goals, was to shoot really dynamic and strong still lifes.
Is it possible to make the images larger?
They're full size on my screen.
It
How
looks,
about everybody
it
else?
looks full screen. It looks right on mine. Anybody else?
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah, looks good.
Who said that? Who asked?
Sandy,
Maybe
Okay.
you need to go up to the top under view options.
yeah, I see that. It's bigger now.
Okay, good. Yeah, so my philosophy in the studio with still lifes as well as with people is generally, and it's not always, but generally one light source. My theory is there's one sun. It does a pretty good job lighting things. So I use, generally speaking, just one light. Okay, so after Art Center, which is a 3-year program where all you do is shoot. There are no books, okay? You have minimum of 6 classes a week, and every instructor thinks they're the most important person at school. and you're working night and day is really what it comes down to. So it's your program, you have to plan on 60 to 80 hours of photography, darkroom work. That was back in the days of our darkroom. That's just the way it was. Okay, so right after Art Center, I graduated. And 2 weeks later, there's something going on there. I don't know what.
Okay, everybody mute.
Okay, there we go.
Thank you.
Yeah, so 2 weeks after I finished Art Center, I was there's don't know. Okay, let's try it again.
Does anybody have any ideas why it's doing that?
It's iPhone 13 Pro, whoever that is.
I'm gonna try to mute him. Hold on. Let's try again.
Okay, let's try again. Do you think
There
we
we
got
go.
it? There we go. All right, so like I said, I was off to Switzerland, and upon arriving there, we are dealing with technical issues here. Okay, upon arriving there, one of the first big jobs I got was a people job, and primarily my portfolio at the time was mostly still lifes. And the people job, it was a presentation for a German bank, and we were given the contract to shoot 11 ads over a weekend. And we had to cast them, find locations, find props, and spent the weekend in the studio. And these are some of those 3 of the outtakes. And then this is more of the same, more of the, not obviously not the bank, but just shooting people pretty much constantly. This series of ads won a lot of awards, and it was for a breath mint. A very, very creative ad agency put this together. We did the casting, actually in the end result, also did TV commercials to go along with it. And if somebody wanted rain in the studio, we made rain in the studio. I mean, we did whatever we could whenever we could, and there were no holds barred. Did a series of 3 ads here. This was all about snow tires. And I wanted to make sure you could see the breath of the radio announcer who was giving the weather report for the evening. And so we actually rented a freezer at an ice cream company and went in there, built the sets in the freezer, and went in there, lit it, and we shot all day in the freezer, and had fake snow, did the whole thing, and it was quite a wild experience. The main thing that happened, or what was really interesting, is how much you slow down when you're in the cold. I mean, everything became a real task because this was probably 20 degrees below freezing. And then, every now and then we would do castings in London. So that's where we got our Tina Turner lookalike. And Mick. And this was also obviously done in the studio. The set behind that's leaning was actually built by set builders, because this is all pre-Photoshop. This is when we're actually shooting film. And the car was shot separately from the people. This was a series I shot with an 8x10-inch view camera. We shot about 90 people. It was a series of ads with relatively famous Swiss people and something that had a lot of meaning to them. Okay, this guy here was a writer. He wrote film scripts. He was a runner, and these were her Lucky Underwear. And these guys were French rap artists. Then we did a series of ads for a ski resort, but instead of talking about the snow, which everybody can talk about in Switzerland, we were doing portraits of people that made the resort special. And the guy with the wine box under his arm, he had the second best wine cellar in Switzerland. And on top of it, he was an incredible chef. And the guy on the left-hand side owned a hotel, and it was kind of a popular hangout for the young people. And the pigs were turned into prosciutto. That was part of what the chef did. This guy here had a jewelry store, and I saw the countertop, and I said, okay, looks like a surfboard to me. Let's get you up there. And he was all for it. This is Dieter Meyer from the music group Yellow, which was very popular in the 90s. Did a couple of different shots with him. That's him also, same day. So this was all, you know, it was the makeup artist, styling, and his really good attitude to get the photographs that he needed and that we wanted. This was a self-promotion that we did for the studio because I wanted to start doing more set building for shoots. So we built this set in the studio, complete with fireplace and real fire because, again, no Photoshop. And yeah, we were pretty successful after. I mean, we started doing a lot more set building after this promotional piece. And this is what we did the next year. These were our Christmas, New Year's cards that we sent out to clients and people that we wanted to make our clients. So this is, you know, we built this bathroom in the studio. And if you look closely, you can see that there's actually water coming out of the faucet. So we built the studio about 18 inches off the ground and had a pumping system that pumped water through. This is a series when I was starting to get really burnt out on advertising work, which is a lot of fun, but it's also a lot of personality that you have to deal with. So I decided I wanted to start shooting more corporate stuff. And this was the CEO of a company that made shoes for Hugo Boss. So they employed me to go to their factories and document the shoe building or shoe making, which was really a lot of fun because really all the shoes were handmade, and everybody was so helpful. And again, all shot on film, 35 millimeter, probably pushed Tri-X, all with available light, with the exception of the portrait in the beginning. So storytelling is something that I really, really love to do with photography. I mean, that to me is probably my, you know, right now the thing that I like to do the most and has been for a number of years. This is Keith Haring. So I spent a day with Keith Haring in Zurich. He was brought to Zurich by the owner of a boutique that was just opening. And she wanted me to document his day producing this canvas. So this was about 10 o'clock in the morning when he started the canvas. And I was there the whole day as he painted and documented the whole thing. So again, you know, trying to tell the story as well as I possibly could. And what was really cool with him is, as you can see, he went out and mixed with the public during the course of the afternoon. And yeah, he drew a huge crowd, and mostly, obviously, young people. And he was a really easy guy to work with. This guy shaved his head for an original hearing. This is one of my favorite pictures of all time. And then I thought, well, time to get out of Switzerland. Where should we go? We looked at a lot of different options. London was one of them, but the cost of living in London and the wages in London just didn't make any sense. And I did have a little bit of an itch to get back to the States. So we ended up coming to the Bay Area. And one of my first jobs was with Apple Computer. The goal here was dynamic architecture with two people in the picture. And that was it. It was really a wide open playing field. Yeah, it was a great job because I couldn't say an unlimited budget, but anything I wanted to do, we were able to do. This is inside City Hall in San Francisco, which you'd never be able to get in there today and do this. So this was lit. This is the only shot that I had to light. Everything else was available light. Here we put the people on a scaffold so we could silhouette them against the window because the walkway is actually, a good 6 feet below them. Then I shot quite a bit for Levi's kids. And these shots were all done. They were shooting some TV commercials down in Los Angeles. And I went down to shoot stills in parallel with the TV commercial. And then this is stuff we did in the studio at another time. This was one of our set builds in the studio. It was a heavy schlep of paper, as you can see. But that's where, you have a stylist, she gets out and does her homework and comes back with the goods. And we spent a couple days setting this up before the shoot. And one of my philosophies is always make sure everybody's comfortable that we're shooting with, and hopefully they're having a good time. And what I very often do in groups, after talking with them, I kind of find a person that I can give a little bit of a bad time to. And that's what I did here. And that's what got these guys cracking up. And then this was kind of an exciting job also. I was asked to go to Mexico City and shoot President Vicente Fox. So this was 2001. It was just before 9/11. So he could actually still go and not get on an airplane with equipment really easily. So the two gentlemen on the left-hand side were doing an interview for a book, and they wanted that documented. And when I'm there, I'm shooting everything. And his hands really, to me, were telling a big story at the time. He was very animated, a really, really nice guy. Yeah, it was a fun shoot. And I wasn't holding back. I mean, I had to have a picture of his boots and his saddle. And then these are just a series of corporate executives. I did a lot of corporate work, shooting executives down in Silicon Valley and wherever they would send me. And then There were a lot of group shots that I had to do. This one was simple. It was lit perfectly by the windows and easy group to work with. This next one was kind of a different story. This was for United California Bank. That's what it was called at the time. So these people came from all over the world for a board meeting. And we had them for about 15 minutes. So this set that you're looking at did not exist. We actually built it. There was a big room in the same building that was not being used. It had a high ceiling. We actually brought in the floor. It's actually a stone floor, had the guys lay the stone, put up the walls, brought in windows without glass in them or the frames without glass, totally built the set. Behind the windows, we put in a green screen that could be keyed out. And then we keyed in the cityscape after the fact. Before everybody showed up, we set the furniture. We looked to see where we wanted everybody to stand. We put tape on the floor with the names of the people and where they had to stand. And everything was lit from above. We made a grid of poles to hang the light from. And they came in and we shot, and in 15 minutes, they were on their way out of there. And we were lucky. We got one shot where they all looked good. And they were very easy to work with because they knew that they had to look good for the shot. But it was a lot of work, but fun. And having fun is a big priority in my life. Okay, this next series is kind of what I call spare parts. It's stuff that I did for myself for the most part. And this was done for band. And again, it's just documenting everything that they could possibly use for online usage as well as for promotion of their music. And then this is just a series of portraits that I randomly did of people. I would have people come into the studio if friends, and if I would see somebody on the street, like this woman, her hair kind of did it for me, and I asked her if she would come to the studio, and she most certainly did. This guy here, he's actually works at the Buckeye and at Barbacci, and he's got a shoe issue, okay? And he had just gotten these clogs and had spent an awful lot of money on them. Were made by a very famous shoe designer, I don't remember the name, and he wanted a picture of himself with the shoes. So he came into the studio for this. This picture here was for an ad agency. Friends of mine, and I shot this here in the States. Friends of mine in Switzerland had an ad agency. It was called B&H Advertising. And in Swiss German, BH, which is BH, stands for breast holder. So their thing was making a calendar, or I don't remember what year it was, and they sent, they asked 12 photographers to shoot a photograph with a bra. And rather than looking for that beautiful woman, I just, that's not my style. It took me a long time to come up with this one, but once I did, I knew that that was it. This was an invitation to a party, everybody dressed in drag. another invitation. And these are people, real people. I mean, every now and then I would use real models, but for the most part, I used non-professional models all my life. These were owners of an ad agency. This guy here was a really famous designer in Switzerland. He actually was very instrumental in the Swatch watch when it first came out. He did a lot of the design work on that. He was a lawyer that went after the Swiss banks for the Holocaust money. And I saw him on television one night, and he just laid into the president of the Swiss bank at the time. And that's like the Treasury Secretary. And I wrote him a letter the following day and asked if I could do his portrait. And he said yes. So I went to his office and shot him. Really incredible character. And then this was a series that I started doing at one point. I referred to it as shutter drag, which is kind of a common term anyway. You set up your strobe. You got to make sure the light level outdoors is not too overwhelming. So end of the day is best, or early morning, or in shade. That can work also. Shot it at usually an eighth of a second or a quarter of a second, so I could get the exposure on the background more or less, and the strobe would override the exposure of the background. You had to place your person against something dark so they wouldn't blur out too much. And I did a whole series of this, and during the dot-com boom, so that was, the early 2000s, I was using this technique all the time down the peninsula because everybody wanted to look edgy until the bubble bursted. Then they didn't anymore. This is Peter Coyote, which I'm sure a lot of you people recognize. Another musician. And then one thing I do when I travel, I like to shoot iconic buildings and landmarks, but I'm always looking to do it differently, which is the big challenge. And this is just some street stuff in San Francisco, Washington, D.C. Okay, and now we're back in San Anselmo. So now I will plug the image flow. So basically the image flow, I don't know how many of you are familiar with us, but we were in Mill Valley for 13 years, and then the building we were in got sold, and we had to find a new home, and ended up in the theater here. So what we do is we teach photography, we print, we do retouching, we do art reproduction, we scan, we do digital capture for people's archives. So people that have family albums and, just an awful lot of photography or documents that they need digitized, we do that. At the old image flow, or back earlier pre-COVID, teaching was one of the biggest things we did. It was about probably 45% of our income was workshops and one-on-one instruction. So this was our first exhibition that we had at the Image Flow here in San Anselmo. That was with Jeffrey March, who is the photo teacher at Archie Williams High School, who used to do a lot of lecturing for us, and hopefully still will, or will soon again. So one of our main destinations in our travel workshops was Cuba. We took 4 groups there, 4 separate groups over a 3-year period. And we had great people on the ground in Cuba that would get us into just about anywhere we wanted to go. and they knew where we should go, which was key. So this is stuff just shot on the street, as you can see. And people there, if anybody has a little anxiety shooting people on the street, go to Cuba, because 95% of the people, if you ask them or if you just point to their camera, they'll say yes. They love to be photographed. So yeah, it's probably about the easiest place in the world to photograph people. And we took, the last trip we took there, we did a road trip. We rented three drivers with their 51 Chevy, their 53 Chevy, and their 55 Chevy. And we traveled for 7 days around the country. And this was one of the stops was obviously at a tobacco farm, and this was their cigar roller, or one of them. This is going into the mangroves on the boat you just saw. And this is the crew on the road. And then these photographs here, just getting back to my still life thing, these were done for examples for the still life class, or one of the many still life classes we had at the Image Flow. And again, everything shot with just one light, you know, and a lot of times, rather than adding light, you're subtracting light. These were tulips that were frozen. So here, again, one light source, but you can tell that the way I broke up the light with the light source, there's some on the glove and the wire. It gets dark, and then we've got a little bit of light again in the background and along the side, just to break up the background. But again, all those things are non-recognizable, relatively shallow depth of field. When I'm shooting this type of stuff, I basically bracket my aperture. Because sometimes you'll think, yeah, I want a really shallow depth of field, and then it ends up being too shallow. So I'll start off at, maybe f2 and then work up to f5.6. And again, this is all with tungsten light, so not with strobe. And then this was, excuse me, some outtakes from, we did a workshop at Salton Sea and Joshua Tree. And this is basically East Jesus, which is, I'm not sure what it is, but well, there's Slab City, there's Bombay Beach, there's East Jesus, and East Jesus is a place where there's some pretty odd people hanging out, but they're so nice. They were definitely dropouts from society, but just really nice people. And, I looked at it and I said, okay, this is exactly where they belong, because they're, in a sense, misfits. They don't belong in, or don't fit into society. It's not that they don't belong, they don't fit into society. So it's a perfect place for them to be. And this was their outdoor art museum. And they gave us a tour, and it was a very thorough tour. And they're just, yeah, really nice about it. I shot this all with film, Hasselblad. These are all TV sets that they found wherever they found them. And these were a couple of the characters. And then we also did just prior to COVID, like weeks before we were, had to close down for COVID, we went to Death Valley with Michael Gordon, This was a workshop, 4 days of shooting in Death Valley. We've got it scheduled again for next February. It was amazing because first of all, Michael spends as much time in Death Valley as he possibly can. He goes usually out there towards the end of October, early November, and stays until the end of February, early March. I mean, he bounces back and forth to LA where he lives normally, but he spends as much time out there as he can. He just loves it. And he knows everything about it. He knows the geology, he knows the history, he knows why the mountains are shaped the way they are, how the dunes got there. So it's a fascinating trip. It's a total educational experience. And this is everybody out on the salt flats. And one thing that we really push for is everybody does their own thing. We don't want to do any workshop where everybody's lined up and shooting the same thing. That to me is a worthless endeavor. And the mountains in this area are actually that color. It's like Neapolitan ice cream. And then we do some local workshops. This was an evening workshop that we do. Hendrik Paul works with us and takes groups out because he does a lot of night shooting. So he's our night shooting specialist. And this was from a motion workshop we had, shooting slow shutter speed. And this was a group that we took to Italy a few years ago. We spent 10 days in Umbria and shooting the slow food movement. So it was a lot of photography and a tremendous amount of eating really, really, really good food. This is Dan Coburn, who's a relatively well-known artist. He does a lot of cyanotype printing. He's a documentary photographer. He taught a cyanotype workshop with us. Really interesting work. This is Ed Cathy, who is a documentary photographer, did a workshop with us. And that is it. That was Louis the chimpanzee.
That's wonderful.
There we go.
All right.
Okay. Stop the share. Okay.
That's fantastic. What an amazing journey you've had with your camera. That's so inspiring. Thank you so much for sharing all that.
Oh, you're welcome. My pleasure.
Yeah, wonderful.
Yeah,
Thank
no,
you.
I've been incredibly fortunate to have made a living with photography all my life.
How did you get to photograph the chimp? What was the job?
It was a job, yeah. It was actually for Hallmark cards.
That would
And
be
we had I think with four chimpanzees for 2 days in the studio and out on location.
that'd be a dream.
How many languages do you speak?
I speak English and I can get by with Swiss German. So yeah, I lived in Switzerland for 15 years. And yeah, when I realized really early on that the only way to live in a foreign country is to first understand everything and then start speaking it. Because otherwise you're an outsider. It's just no, hands down. I mean, almost or a lot of people, probably 80% of the people in big cities speak English. But if you're at a party or some type of event, everybody's speaking Swiss German or speaking their native language. So you'll just be an outsider if you don't understand it. So that was one of the first things that I did was went to like Berlitz school and learned German. 3 hours a week, 5 days a week for 3 months.
Wow.
Sorry.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
That was wonderful.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and come and visit us at the Flow. We're there 10 to 6, Monday through Friday. And there's generally 3 of us there, and some really talented people. Nathan, who's been with us for going on 7 years, is an absolute genius with Lightroom and Photoshop. You can't stump the guy. He teaches Lightroom and Photoshop for us, has been for years. And he'll always find a solution. And he's really good at helping people organize their archives and really good at helping people find their images when they get lost. I can relate to myself.
How long have you been there?
We've only been there since the 1st of December. So we had to move out of our last place in end of June last year. And then we did find a place in Larkspur, and we're scheduled to move in there August 1st. But the people that were in there never moved out, even though the lease had expired. So we had to start our search over again, and then found the place in San Anselmo.
Yeah, I'm glad you did that.
Yeah, so we're happy. We're really happy to be in San Anselmo. It's a great town.
Yeah, welcome to San Anselmo, and I look forward to coming in there. I'm really impressed at your work. Is just incredible. The scope of it. I wanted to ask, you mentioned about the advertising firm B&H Advertising. I got a kick out of that. But did you work for more? You must have worked for a lot of different agencies, right?
Yeah.
Or just
I worked freelance. I was always independent.
Okay, good. Okay, I just wondering if it was just one agency or you
No,
spread yourself out.
it was whatever agency would.
Yeah, it looks like you're in demand. I'm really impressed at the work you did without Photoshop in those days. It was a big production.
Yeah, very impressive.
Yeah, so
Thanks.
thanks.
That's what was expected of me back in the day.
Yeah. I went to Brooks Institute of Photography back in the day, so I never really got into it, but just back into it like a hobby now. So yeah, good to see your work. Really, really fine stuff.
Thank you. Yeah, and it was, working with people is just fun. And that's one of the main things, is make sure your subjects in front of the camera are having a good time.
Yeah.
That's, and that they're comfortable. That's the main thing. And, with shooting all the executives that I shot over the years, some of them, it was just great. There's one guy in particular, and then I'll stop talking eventually. He was the head of applied materials, and he was one of the original scientists there. And I shot him, year after year after year. And on his last portrait for the last annual report that he was going to be in, he put aside several hours of the day for us just to hang out. We had to shoot him in 3 different locations on the campus. And he and I sat in a conference room, and we just talked while the assistants were out setting up. But we had such a nice relationship that he goes, "Hey, this is going to be the last time. Let's spend some time together." And I was not expecting that. But, I got there and he goes, after the first shot, he goes, "Well, why don't we go into the conference room and just hang out for a while?" And it was great. It was absolutely great. I mean, it was one of the fondest memories I have of, my experience, just the fact that, he didn't have to do that. And the fact being that he enjoyed our relationship over the years enough to do it really meant a lot to me.
Give us I would love to hear some of your tips for making it fun for your clients.
Well, the most important thing is to be so totally ready for them when they show up. You can't be sitting there trying to figure out what's going to happen next or be fumbling around with anything technical. You have to be ready for it. Generally speaking, when I was doing that, I would Google the person, find out a little bit about them, so I could open up a conversation with them really easily. And usually that conversation would just veer off and go in God knows what direction. Anything from family to vacations to hobbies to what really pisses them off in the world. It was all over the place. And, many times I only had the person for 5 minutes. So you had to be working, keeping up conversation, making sure that they're looking in the lens because they always want to have that eye contact with the viewer. One thing that I do, if the top of my camera is, or my viewfinder is here, my eye is right over the top of the viewfinder. So I'm looking at them in the eye. And it looks like they're still looking in the lens because my eye is so close to the viewfinder. But that gives us more of a personal contact than if I'm looking through the camera. And then it's just keeping them in conversation, because as they're in conversation, they lose their inhibitions to some degree and they become animated. You have to shoot a hell of a lot more because you're always going to have those off moments where, they're thinking, their eyes are closed or their mouth is in a weird position. But generally speaking, after they've made a statement or we've talked about something, there's a split second where they really look good. And that's what you're after, that you're shooting the whole time. So they don't feel that, never give them the feeling that they're doing something wrong. Okay. I mean, I've seen photographers work where they'll tell their subject, no, that doesn't look good. As soon as you do that, you've lost them. You're screwed. You just blew it. Okay, so you never do that. If they want to do something and you think it's not good, you shoot it anyway, and then you direct them back to where you want them to be. So that's kind of how I play the game.
Okay, it's helpful.
I have to say, I've known Stuart for a few years now. I'm Margot, but I've taken classes at Image Flow I took him at the old location and now the new location, and known Stuart for about 3 years, maybe more, 4 years. And I knew some of your work, but I'm so impressed with the body of work. And I knew some of the story, but to hear all of the story, it's been wonderful to see that after knowing you for so long. So I'm glad that you showed us all of that and shared with us.
Thanks. I'm glad that you made it.
And I can vouch for Nathan. He is a wizard.
Thank you.
Do you shoot mostly now with digital or still film?
I shoot mostly digital, but I do still shoot film because I don't know if some of you know what Hasselblad sounds like. I love that sound. So I shoot with my Hasselblad from time to time. And the interesting thing is I don't often develop the film. So I've got a lot of film that I've shot that has not been developed. But it's just the exercise of going out and shooting. And, shooting digitally is, it's challenging like everything else. But at the same time, I feel that I need to push myself more. So I shoot with the Hasselblad and I still sometimes shoot with the 8x10 view camera.
So where you are now, you don't develop, do contact sheets for people, or you do?
No, we don't, unfortunately. Yeah, unfortunately, we had the darkroom before. It was a rental darkroom. And so we had, a handful of people that used it frequently. And, yeah, that's one of the things that that I miss the most, honestly. We used to have a lot of alternative process workshops, so photogravure, platinum printing, cyanotype printing, gum printing. So, and those workshops are really exciting because it brought in a new clientele, plus it brought in a whole world that I knew nothing about before I had the image flow in Mill Valley. I had never dealt with alternative process. And then we rented a room, which he turned into a dark room, to a fellow photographer that I'd known for a long time. And he got me very interested in the alternative processes, and he was very helpful in pulling in instructors and people that were very well known out there in the field. And it brought in a lot of people from outside our community. We honestly had people flying in from all over the world to take some of these workshops. South Korea, Moscow, Argentina, Denmark were just a few of the countries that people came from, which was mind-boggling, that people would get on a plane and do that and come and hang out with us. So yeah, that was very cool. But these were people that really they're professional photographers, or were professional photographers, and were just trying to take their level of printing to the next level, because the instructors we had were extremely talented, extremely good in their own right.
Do you have any shows coming up?
Well, we just had a call for entries, which we did. And we had, the theme was community, and we had about 400 images submitted, and that is hanging, the winners and the honorable mention, and then a handful of others are now hanging at the flow. Our next show will be Cyanotypes, which a local artist, well, she's in San Francisco, but she does a lot of work with seaweed and cyanotype printing. So she'll have a workshop, and after she'll have a workshop, I believe it's in October, of 2 days, and 2 individual workshops, one on a Saturday and one on a Sunday. And then after that, we have an alternative process call for entries, which the call is now active, and we're receiving images for that. And then after that, we will have a show of student work. And then after that, who knows?
Could you say again what the one before the students were?
That's will be our alternative process call for entries. So basically, we put out a nationwide call for entries, and we have photographers submitting images to us. We have 3 judges that will judge the work that comes in. So those are all alternative processes that go back to, all the way to the mid 1800s, where people are still experimenting with that process, and are experimenting or actually using that process primarily in their work. And this is the 6th time that we're doing this call. So we've done it 5 other years. And then we skipped the last 2 years we had to skip because of COVID. COVID really kind of threw us for a loop, so to speak, among other things. So we're hopefully getting back on track.
So we talked about a photo challenge. Do you want to tell us, and I'll share my screen here. Do you want to tell us the photo challenge that we came up with?
Yeah, well, we were talking earlier, Stephanie and I were talking earlier, and basically it's just that, get out of your comfort zone. If you're shooting street photography all the time, go out and shoot landscape. And if you're shooting landscape, shoot street. If you're shooting portraits, do a still life with using window light. Everything that you do photographically it's like it all comes together. All the pieces intertwine eventually. And it helps you build confidence with your photography, for one thing. It takes you out of your comfort zone, which is, I think, very important. And, you know, as a still life photographer, when I was really trying really hard to do still lifes, you have to pay such attention to detail, especially then because with film, okay? So everything had to be perfect. Your composition had to be perfect. The lighting had to be perfect. So my attention to detail was pretty extreme. And when I started shooting people, that attention to detail continued. I mean, I didn't, you know, nothing changed. It's just that I had people, but my attention to detail with those people was really extreme. You know, so it was with the lighting, with how I composed the image, with the styling, because we usually had, well, 99% of the time we had a stylist with us on shoot. And yeah, you know, thinking about that raw image, it was all those elements coming together that made that image, you know. So get yourself out of your comfort zone and do it more often than not. You know, it's a great exercise.
All right. I'm gonna stop the recording.
Okie dokie.